introduce the first event of DIW at Guys, I would also like to recite a portion of the Quran for all of you. And this is a portion that Muslims recite every single day, in every single prayer. A prayer isn't valid as according to our jurisprudence if that chapter isn't recited within it. And on top of that, we as Muslims believe that the Quran is the direct word of God. So try to ponder over that as the Quran is recited. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. All praises are due to Allah, to God, the Lord of everything. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most gracious, the most merciful. Maliki Yawmiddin, the master and the owner and the king of the day of judgment. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You alone we worship, and from you alone we seek help. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Guide us along the straight path. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. The path of those whom you have favored. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. Not the path of those upon whom you are angry or those who have gone astray. And this is a profound chapter of the Quran. It's known as the opening of the Quran. And within it, for me, God Almighty teaches us to humble ourselves. No matter how righteous you think you are, how clever or intelligent you think you are, you recognize the sovereignty and the kingship of Allah, of God Almighty, and you ask Him to guide you. And this is the main theme of the Discover Islam Week. We'd like to get everyone together at this campus and go through a journey where we try our best to get rid of any preconceived ideas we may have, or any other type of ideas we may have about Islam, and just approach it in a humble and objective way with sincerity. And in the Quran we find that the way God teaches us is one of rationality, one of reflection, one of pondering. And that is what we wish to do here in the next week. And the lecture theatre is getting quite packed out, so if you do find a seat that's empty, it would be great if you can move down. I think no seats are empty. Alhamdulillah, that's good. So we'll try our best to accommodate as many people as possible. Now, without dragging this along, I'd like to invite our speaker today, Hamza Tzortzis. He's very well known amongst you all. He's come to King's quite a few times before, and he's well known for having debated one of the leading figures in atheism, and he's also going to be speaking to us about the rational proofs behind why we should believe in one God. And without any further delay, I'd like to
I'm going to start as Muslims do, in the name of Allah, in the name of God, and Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah, amma ba'd. To proceed, I greet you all with the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Which basically means may the peace and blessings of God be upon you all. Apologies for maybe sounding less enthusiastic today. I have a flu. I'm just recovering from a flu rather, I don't want to spread it, with a throat infection. So, today's discussion is on essentially God's existence. Now, I want to talk about this in a very unique and different way by really starting off with a idea, a concept called epistemology. Now, what does epistemology mean? Epistemology means the study of knowledge or the study of belief, okay? Epistemology is the study of knowledge or the study of belief. And sometimes, because many of you are budding scientists and we all love science, and science is part of the media narrative now because science works, and if it works, then it's the gospel truth, and if it's the gospel truth, then all the scientists, what they say, the new age priests with the white coats, therefore what they say is absolutely true as well. We have that narrative, don't we? I mean, you hear this all the time. For example, I just had a debate with Professor Lawrence Krauss on Saturday, one of the most leading cosmologists, theoretical physicists in the world, and one of the leading neo-atheists. And you'd see that a lot of people who attended the debate, they had that type of narrative. Because he's a physicist, whatever he says must be true. And you have that kind of narrative. It doesn't only exist amongst the religious folk, but it exists amongst the non-religious folk as well. It's quite interesting when I discuss with them. They say, well, I don't know, just read his book. It's like no different from a Muslim or a theist saying, well, because my book said so. Or because my prophet said so. It's the same kind of narrative, and you see, it's quite interesting. And what was very interesting is Professor Krauss publicly, as an atheist, he basically said many things about the Islamic tradition and pointing the finger at, why do you have a beard? Or why do you cover your hair? Or why do Muslims do this and Christians do that? And that kind of outdated cliche narrative against religion. Religion is wrong, it's backward, it's nonsense. And obviously that agitated me a little bit. And I just said to him, look, as an atheist, you don't have an ontological grounding for objective moral truth. How can you point the finger in an objective, moralist type of way as if what you're saying is the gospel truth? Because in absence of the divine, there is no grounding for objective moral truth. There is no grounding, and we're going to discuss this later. There is no grounding for objective moral truths. Because the divine is the only concept that transcends your subjectivity, my subjectivity, our subjectivity, okay? And then I asked him a question. I said to him, for example, what are your views on incest? And you won't believe what he said. He said, well, I don't think it's morally wrong. If a brother wants to make love to his sister, it's fine, as long as they use contraception. Now the reason I'm raising this is to show that the reaction of some of these people was one of exactly like someone who's enslaved to the high priest. And the irony is that what the neo-atheist narrative accuses Muslims and non-Muslim theists, what they accuse us of, they actually are doing themselves. And the reason I'm raising it is not to be rhetorical, is not to take the mick, frankly. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to highlight a point. We need to become thinking human beings. So we basically remove this dichotomous black and white binary understanding of people who are religious and people who are non-religious. People who are religious are unscientific, and people who are non-religious are scientific. This is absolute rubbish, frankly. And this is why I want to get into epistemology, because epistemology is the study of knowledge and belief. Now, can science, in an age of science, can it actually address the question, does good exist? Because, I'm a broadcaster for Islam channel, I broadcast the show Face the Faith, and we have to ask people questions on the street, and ask them, what do you believe in? What are your views? And they would basically say, well, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. Yeah? And how is that an answer? So, because their assumption is that, by the way, he was a cab driver. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't know. I'm not saying he doesn't know. They have great memories. They're very intelligent people. But you see, that's a representation of a current narrative that's being driven home. Check the Channel 4 news. It resonates with the secular philosophy. And it's unchallenged. Religion is bad. I mean, who saw the Islam's Untold Story by Tom Holland on Channel 4? I mean, that was demythologistic. It was unacademic. You know what? Yeah, it takes a long time it's very easy and quick to excrete on a carpet, but it takes ages to clean it up. Honestly, frankly, it's so quick and easy to poo on the carpet, but it takes so long. If you've got babies, I've got children, right? And sometimes they poo on the floor or they'll pee on the floor. It's so quick, but it will take you ages to clean it up. And this new age secular philosophical narrative is just like that. It's like a kid excreting on the floor, and it's made such a mess But it will take you ages to clean it up. That's why we have to run around every campus in the country to clarify these ideas. And it's unfortunate because people who are nuanced don't have the media power. Sounds like I'm ranting, right? Yeah. But it's good. Because if I don't rant, who's going to rant? You're just going to go home, have your curry, and go to sleep. So the point is, I need to wake somebody up. Isn't it? And that's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to, okay, it's therapy for me as well, yeah? My therapist said talk is good for you, yeah? So this is why. But the point is, I'm trying to highlight a point that when we are nuanced, we see that it's not science versus religion or science versus God. It's actually quite the opposite. So let's go back to epistemology. Can science answer the question, does God exist? Well, when we study the scientific method, we would see actually it can't. It's beyond the scope of the scientific method. Because what is the scientific method? Go to the Berkeley website, the academic website. It discusses the scientific method in detail because it focuses on the natural world. And it aims to test the natural world. And it aims to produce testable ideas. And not only must you have testable ideas, you must test them. Okay? Now, the idea of a beginning, or the idea of a metaphysical, supernatural being, by definition, is outside the scope of science. So you can't directly justify the existence of God, or verify the existence of God, using science per se. You can use it as supporting evidence, but its method doesn't deal with that question, does God exist? For example, does the soul exist? Science, how can you put something you can't really tangibly see or feel and put it into a test tube and test it? It's a non-testable idea. This is in the realm of metaphysics. Now someone would argue, well, metaphysics is unverifiable, is old, is cliched, it doesn't work and it's rubbish. But the irony is that very statement itself is metaphysics. Like Professor Lawrence Krauss in the debate was saying, look, I just do the science, yeah? That's what he said. I just do the science and that's it. And science is the only way to form conclusions about reality. I don't do metaphysics. So the irony is you just made a metaphysical statement. Because science is the only method to form conclusions about reality, can't be proven scientifically. And it can't even prove necessary truths like mathematics. 1 + 1 is equal to 2. And that's a necessary truth. It's not a generalization of an empirical confirmation. And I could confirm that for you. What's 1 fufula plus 1 fufula? Do you know what a fufula is? You don't have empirical evidence, but you know conceptually it's 2. Do you see? Fufula doesn't exist, by the way. Maybe it's a nice Nigerian food, we don't know. So the point is, brothers and sisters and friends, what we have to realize is that science also has some metaphysical presuppositions as well. And science itself can't deal with other metaphysical questions like the existence of God or what is the soul. This is why when you study evolution, it doesn't really deal with the emergence of the first living cell. They have the speculations, but the whole idea of evolution is actually the development of species rather than the origins of life. Because some people think it's the origins of life, and that's not actually true. This is the development of life, rather than the origins per se, because they don't know how the first living cell. Actually, Richard Dawkins in a recent documentary, he did claim to know how the first living cell came here. Do you know what he said? You could check this out on YouTube. He said it was as a result of some alien sending the first life cell, living cell on a meteorite and landing on Earth. Yeah, so that's like a semantic alternative for God. They don't like the G word, but they like the alien word. Yeah, it's much more plausible for them. But anyway, that's the irrationality of the atheist narrative, in my opinion. Not to offend anybody, yeah. But you can offend ideas, but you can't offend people, they say. So science can't deal, its method can't even deal with that question. So this is interesting. Even the Berkeley website discusses the God questions outside of the scientific realm. You have to start delving into the realm of metaphysics or philosophy, or what you would call traditionally rational thought and rational thinking. Even in saying that, if people claim that science can annihilate God, that's actually not true. Take for example Professor Krauss's recent book. It's called A Universe from Nothing. A Universe from Nothing. And in this book, he attempts, right, he attempts to show that the universe came from nothing. Now, interestingly, his nothing is nothing with italics. What does that mean? You can read the book for yourself. And that nothing is actually something. It's a quantum reality. Even with no space and no time, but it's a quantum reality. It's a sea of fluctuating energy, so it's still something. So look what he's doing. He's actually playing games with words, just to remove the metaphysical idea of God. And for example, his view of nothing is equivalent to me saying, earlier I was outside, and basically I saw nobody. And nobody gave me directions to this room. Yeah? Or my wife made amazing lunch yesterday, and it was nothing. Or, nothing tastes great with a little bit of whipped cream. Yeah? And that's what he's done. He's just changed the word nothing into something to make us think in a popular sense that actually the universe came from nothing, so we don't need God anymore. But in reality, his nothing is actually something. He's playing with linguistic devices. It's almost equivalent of saying, my mother is a father who came from a woman that's a man. Do you get the point? It's like mutually exclusive statements. They're paradoxes, oxymorons. And that's why we have to be careful. That was almost another rhyme. Because I don't know where I'm going with this one. Anyway, the point is, yeah, to do with metaphysics. Science can't deal with metaphysical realities from this perspective. And Professor Tzortzis' book is a justification for that. If you see, he's trying to delve into the metaphysics, but all he's doing is just using the inductive method. That's what I want to do. So, induction. That's not right. So, the inductive method is what? It's actually like a thinking process where you take a limited set of observations and you conclude for the next observation or for the entire set of observations. Induction is where you take a limited set of observations and you conclude for the next observation or for the entire set of observations. Let me give you an example. I am a Welsh guy, a Welsh scientist, and I go to Wales and I want to find out the colour of sheep. And sheep are all white. I count 100, 200, 300 and they're all white. So I stop my experiment and then I conclude all sheep are white. But is that true? No, I'm the black sheep of the family. Yeah? So you have black sheep as well, right? So the point I'm trying to say is that the inductive method is not a method that gives you necessary truths. It's what you would call probabilistic. And it ranges from 0 to 99%. Now, why am I mentioning this? I mention this to show that science, whatever it tells you, it's not going to be the gospel truth. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to jump out the window now because gravity is based on induction and therefore there may be a chance that when I jump I can fly. That would be absurd and ridiculous. That's the 99% induction. But many of the models, the theoretical models, even including things like medicine, they have so many presuppositions, observation bias, theory bias, that actually renders the probability to around 50 to 70%. It's not in the 99% range. So when we see things, for example, like a book called A Universe from Nothing, and he concludes the universe came from nothing, therefore we don't need a God, now you know his method is scientific, which is based on induction. And induction is not gospel truth. It's not a necessary truth. Does this make sense to everybody? Does this make sense to everybody? Good. Spokesman for everybody. He's going to be a politician, this guy. So the point is that when you use the inductive method, which is the key thinking process of science, then you realize that it has its limitations. You realize it has its limitations. So this is something key for you to understand, because even, for example, in Professor Krause's book, he says, this is just plausible. We don't have enough empirical evidence. We don't have enough information yet, because it's based on induction. You haven't had an unlimited set of observations or an infinite set of observations. You will never have. And this was actually brought about by the famous skeptic, philosopher, Scottish skeptic, David Hume. In his inquiry, he said, how can you rely on induction for necessary truths? Because it's based on a limited set of data and you're inferring for a generalization. So, if we have this idea in our mind, we know now how to assess these new age books that come out, like a universe from nothing, or Stephen Hawking's book called The Grand Design, when he says the universe can create itself. All these inflationary models and quantum physics and stuff like that, you know it's from the gospel truth because it comes from the inductive method. And the inductive method ranges from 0 to 99%. It's not 100% true. So, the question is then, can we formulate an argument that is necessarily true? I think we can, for the existence of God. Now, there's a key question. I don't know if you've asked this question because many of us have stopped thinking because we read Hello Magazine and FHM and all this other stuff, and we're involved in too many movies and computer games and what my hair looks like, and if I'm going to wear Gucci glasses or if I'm going to wear Prada shoes or a Prada bag. Not pointing any fingers there. Or, silk hijabs and, what size is going to be my diamond ring when I'm married, and you were thinking about this when you were 7. We're really immersed ourselves in this culture of learning but not thinking. I'm telling you, we've immersed ourselves in this culture of learning but not thinking. Because interestingly, in the Islamic tradition, the Quran, the book of humanity, which Muslims believe to come from the divine, it actually tries to make you think and reflect. It tries to do that. It tries to agitate your thinking. وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus do explain our signs in detail for those who reflect, who ponder, who use their minds and intellect. Now the word يَتَفَكَّرُونَ comes from the triliteral stem فَكَرَى. Now if you look at the classical Arabic dictionaries, this actually means the thing that you're reflecting upon, you must inquire deeply about its implications. Don't be a desert romantic, touching the sand, looking at the stars, writing poetry to your loved one, and drinking a glass of milk. But rather think about the implications of what you're reflecting upon, like your consciousness. How is it that I have this subjective experience of intentionality and conscious awareness, and I'm not only aware that I'm conscious, but I'm aware that I'm conscious? And how can that be? Because how can consciousness come from non-conscious matter? And this is quite significant, which I would argue is quite a profound argument for God's existence as well. The reality that we have consciousness. As the physicist Schroeder said, there's no real difference between the brain of an Einstein and a lump of sand. The difference is consciousness. So we need to think deeply about the implications of things. So when we think about the universe, we can ask the question, why is the universe here in the first place? Why does it exist rather than nothing? This is a critical question. I know it leads to ideas such as purpose, but I want it to make us reflect upon the reality of the universe in terms of why is it the way that it is. Now, traditionally, from an atheistic perspective, you had the grandfather of neo-atheism, who's Bertrand Russell, on a radio program. He said, the universe is just there, and that's all. It's a brute fact. Get over yourself, get over your thinking, be depressed, you're not going to answer the question. So essentially he was saying the universe is just eternal. Interestingly, the 8th century Islamic or Muslim philosophical naturalists of the time called the Dahriya actually rejected God's existence, so they're not really Islamic in the first place, yeah? But they were in our culture in the 8th century, and they were what you would call the equivalent of the modern day philosophical naturalists. And the philosophical naturalists are basically saying that the universe is a closed system. It's like a box that you close, nothing outside the box can affect the box, and everything can be explained within the box. That's the universe. No supernatural, no God, that's it. So, these type of historical opinions, if we reflect upon them, we know they're absurd. Because if the universe is eternal, what does it imply? It actually implies that the history of the universe is also eternal. Which means that the history of the universe is infinite. Infinite. But the question here is, can we have the infinite in the real world? Does the infinite exist in reality? And the infinite I'm talking about is the quantitative infinite, not the qualitative infinite. The quantitative infinite is the infinite of discrete parts you can quantify. I'm not talking about the qualitative infinite, like the infinity of God, for example, or in mathematics. Professor Krauss on Saturday, he drew a circle and the diameter on the circle. And he said, look, the ratio between the diameter and the circumference is what? Pi, which is 3.14, blah, 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 blah. And that goes ad infinitum. He said, therefore you can't have an actual infinite. He said, no, you misrepresented something here. You can actually measure the circumference, and the diameter. The pi is a ratio. A ratio is a qualitative infinite. This is the quantitative. You can quantify the measurement. So there is a difference. So can we have the quantifiable infinite in the real world? No way, Jose. And this is the reason. Because the infinite, in a quantifiable sense, doesn't make any sense at all. It leads to paradoxes, it leads to absurdities. For example, if I had an infinite number of cups in this room, I take 5 cups away, how many cups do we have left? Infinity? Or infinity minus 5, you're a logician. But practically, if there was an infinite set of something, and I took 5 away, there should be less than that set. So practically and quantifiably it leads to paradoxes. So therefore we know there is no ontological export of the infinite into the real world, which basically means there is no export of the idea of the infinite into the real world. So therefore we can conclude that you can't have an infinite past for the universe, because the past is real. And this is something that even Al-Ghazali spoke about in his book Tahafut al-Falasifa, the refutation of the philosophers. Ibn Taymiyyah spoke about this in his As-Safadiyya. So we have all these people, all these theologians and thinkers in our tradition talking about the past finitude nature of the universe and creation. So we can conclude that the universe must have begun to exist. Because if it can't have an infinite past, it means it has a finite past. If it has a finite past, it means it once wasn't there. And then it once was brought into being. Does everyone follow so far? So the universe began essentially. If the universe began, there are 4 possible conclusions. If the universe began, there are 4 possible conclusions. Number one, the universe came from or via nothing. Number 2, the universe created itself. Number 3, the universe was created by something else created. And number 4, the universe was created by something uncreated. Okay? So, interestingly, these logical possibilities have Quranic origin. In chapter 52, verses 35 to 36, the Quran actually speaks about these logical possibilities. For instance, the Quran says, do you think you came from nothing? You created yourself? Or do you create the heavens and the earth? Bal, la yuqinun. Bal, it's like it's a rhetorical ploy, meaning forget the rationality, you're still not going to believe. Because essentially atheism is the problem of the heart, not the mind. The mind is to wake up the heart. If that doesn't work, then you have no heart and you have no mind. No offense. Remember, you can offend ideas, not people. So, what is my point? My point is this. My point is, therefore, that we need to now answer the questions. Can it come from nothing? Can it create itself? Can it be created by something else created? Or can it be created by something uncreated? Well, let's discuss. Could the universe come from, I like to use the word via nothing. From is misleading, because we know that the universe was preceded by its non-existence. So could it be in a state of non-existence and start to exist via nothing? This is Ibn Taymiyyah's answer to the question, because you don't have to answer, well then how did God create the universe? Because that's essentially outside of our realm. So he really didn't play with linguistics, he really took the 3rd generation approach and saying, well, can the universe come via nothing? Like a state change, non-existence to existence. If I have an ice cube in my hand, why does it change state from a solid to a liquid? It changes state via temperature, not via nothing. Similarly with the universe, if it was nothing that became something, if it once didn't exist and it began to exist, then that has to be metaphysically, ontologically, philosophically, rationally, it had to be via something. Via a creative process or a cause. Now, we could do this mathematically. What's 0 plus 0 plus 0? It's 3 zeros. No, it's never going to be 3, is it? It's never going to be 4. It's never going to be 1. Because 0, 0, 0 is always going to give you 0. Similarly, when you have non-existence plus non-existence plus non-existence, what do you get? Non-existence. It's so simple, isn't it? So simple. We get back with these ideas from the Dawkinites and the Hitchenites and the Kraussian philosophies. You know? The Kraussian philosophies of, it's far more complex than that, and you have to do science and all this rubbish. But at the end of the day, it's hocus pocus, this atheism, man. I'm telling you. Wallahi, it's hocus pocus. I'm telling you. For example, Stephen Hawking, yeah? Stephen Hawking. Quantum vacuum plus subatomic events plus gravity equal to the universe. Just change the language, people. Magician plus empty box plus abracadabra, rabbit. It's hocus pocus. That's what they want you to believe in. Hocus bloody hocus. Yeah? Now, you know why I'm being rhetorical as well? Because they do it to us all the time. It's time we change the tables as well. Yeah, I had enough. Yeah. Just check on YouTube the amount of vicious. I spent the whole morning on Twitter. Yeah. Yesterday I had the flu. From 8 in the morning to 12 at night, I was on Facebook and Twitter. I'm not saying this to boast, but who follows me on Twitter? Okay, 4, 5 people, 6, 7, 8. So, if you notice recently what's been happening as well. It's a lot of craziness. Attacking you, misrepresentations, ad hominems, attacking your character, attacking, Professor Crash, what he said about Allah, God, yesterday? Because Allah is a creep. I mean, these people don't have an argument. When you see the video, you see it's the most entertaining thing. You have popcorn. Yeah? Have popcorn. Listen, honestly. And you should see his face as well. It's just phenomenal. And it's because it's arrogance. It's kibr. You know the famous Pakistani poet, Iqbal? He made a beautiful point. He said, the atheist is lost within the universe. But the universe is lost within the believer. And that's so true. Because we know that the macrocosm is just a reflection of the microcosm. And that's why we see nature as oneness. We don't reduce it to these particles like the Higgs boson and all these things, and therefore, we have life. Anyway, so it's hocus pocus. The universe couldn't come from nothing. Could it create itself? Well, that's an impossibility because it implies that it was in existence and not in existence at the same time. Is this possible? Is this possible? Can you exist and not exist at the same time? Can your mother give birth to herself? No, exactly. It's just irrational. Now, I had one contention from the head of the British Humanist Association. I mean, they're supposed to be the rationalists, the postmodern thinkers. They love postmodernism, post-enlightenment thinking. But he said, no, the universe can create itself because of asexual reproduction. You have a single cell, then it starts to divide. Then you have asexual reproduction. And I started to laugh, not out of arrogance, because I said to him, you just justified our position. Because first and foremost, you're assuming the first cell is there. The universe once wasn't there, so it's not an explanation. Secondly, how on earth do you think the cell replicates? It's perpetual? It needs energy from what? Outside of itself. If the universe had to bring itself into existence, it would need something other than the universe. So you just justified my conclusion. So let me just delete this. Because last time I got complaints. So, you know what? You guys have to purify your mind. Honestly. That was the test. That was the test. So listen to me. So it couldn't be self-creation. Now, could it be created by something else created? Like another universe, for example. But ultimately, as an explanation, this is not a valid explanation. Why? Because if this universe was as a result of another universe, and that universe was as a result of another universe, and this went on ad infinitum, would we ever have the universe? No, it's impossible. It's like, for example, me walking to this room and hearing my name echoed. Hamza, Hamza, Hamza. Am I going to assume that was going ad infinitum forever? No, it initiated, it started. Also, if you have a whole row of dominoes, you don't see the end of the chain goes beyond the horizon, but you see all the dominoes have fallen in front of you. What do you assume? Do you assume the domino chain goes on forever? No, you know someone must have initiated it for these dominoes to have fallen in front of me. So an infinite regress of causes is irrational. This is why Dr. Jafar Idris, one of the leading Islamic theologians, contemporary theologians, and I would argue Muslim philosophers. And when I say Muslim philosophers, I don't say ilmul kalam, I don't say theoretical speculative discourse. I'm talking about a thought process, a philosophy based on the Quran and Sunnah. And that's very important for us to realize. So, Dr. Jafar Idris, he says, well, if that was the case, there was an infinite regress of causes, you would have just non-existence. But since we have existence, there must have been something other than a temporal cause, meaning other than something that began to exist. And so it leads to our final conclusion, which is, there must have been an uncreated creator. And this is why the philosopher Abraham Varghese in his book, well, it's not his book, in the appendix to Professor Anthony Flu's book, There Is a God, he says, look, atheists and theists do not deny. Atheists and, sit down darling. Atheists and theists do not deny that something must precede the universe that didn't begin to exist. It's either the universe or what caused the universe. Take your choice. But since the universe began, it couldn't be that. It must be the thing that created the universe. So there's an uncreated creator. Now that doesn't mean Allah exists or God exists, but rather it means there's an uncreated creator, and we've used the rational process for this. But if we continue with this rational process, we could conclude 6 things about this uncreated creator that is directly in line with the Islamic theological concept of the divine reality of Allah. So if it's uncreated creator, it must be eternal, okay? Because it's uncaused. It must be powerful. It brought into existence an atom, for example. If you split the atom, you get a lot of energy. It must be perpetually, is it 2 L's? Perpetually knowing or intelligent. Why? Since it's eternal, and it also brought into existence established laws like the law of gravity, it implies it's a lawgiver. So we could infer it's eternally or perpetually knowing. 4, must be transcendent. What do we mean by transcendent? Yeah, I can't spell it, so dot. So transcendent means that it's distinct and disjoint from the universe. As Ibn Taymiyyah, the classical theologian, said, the creator is distinct and disjoint from the universe. Because if I was to, for example, create this table, I don't become the table, do I? Exactly, so I'm distinct and disjoint from the table. Number 5, this uncreated creator must have a will. In Islamic thought, it's called irada. The reason it must have a will, because since it's eternal, and it brought into existence the universe that began to exist, it must have chosen the universe to come into existence. And choice indicates a will, and a will indicates it can have a relationship with conscious beings in the universe. Finally, it must be one. The reason it must be one, we have a whole theology and philosophy for this, but let me just give you one argument. The argument is a rational principle called Occam's razor. Now, Occam's razor is misunderstood. It says, do not multiply entities beyond necessity. No. What it really means is the simplest explanation and the most comprehensive is the best explanation. And what does comprehensive mean? It means 2 things. It has explanatory scope. It answers more questions. And explanatory force or power. And it does them in a rational way. So not only must it be simple but comprehensive. This is why it might be a little bit complex as an explanation, but it fulfills the other criteria of being comprehensive. So they have to be together. It's not or. It has to be simple or comprehensive. It's as simple as possible and as comprehensive as possible. So when you talk about the oneness of God, it's simple and it's comprehensive. It answers all the questions of why the universe came into being. If you see there's 2 or 3, it may be slightly simple. It's not comprehensive anymore, especially in scope. Why? Because now you ask the question, how on earth these 2 eternal beings coexist? So you ask the question you can't answer, so it de-scopes the explanation. So rationally, the oneness of God is a more simple, rational explanation. That's why the Quran says that polytheism is just stupid. And that's true, rationally speaking. So look what we've done. We've just concluded what the Quran Quran concluded 1400 years ago. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Say God is one, eternal, unique, self-subsisting. He begets not, nor was he begotten. There is nothing like unto him. Every single verse in that book implies these things. In that chapter implies these things. Allah by definition is a powerful being and is knowing. He is eternal. He begets not, nor was he begotten. There is nothing like unto him. He's transcendent. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say God is uniquely one. He has the will, because that's implied in the name Allah, the deity. So there you go. God exists. But obviously it's not as simple as that. Who's going to buy that? Because, human beings are not just rational human beings. If we were, then I would argue everyone would become a Muslim. It's true. If we were all rational, then they'll think about Islam at least. Yeah. And they'll think about theism, and they would accept this, that, this is the best explanation for the divine reality. It's in line with Islamic theology. Because other theologies don't really agree with all of this. Do you see? Especially Christian Trinitarianism, where Jesus is not really transcendent, but yet he's God as well, which is a problem. That's a different issue. But we need to have some emotions as well. We need to think about reality. And I would argue, look, at the end of the day, guys, without God in your life, no matter how big your ego is, no matter how much money your parents have, or how much A stars you got, or what kind of medicine you're going to get into, because unfortunately, most of you are medics, right? Yeah. Be careful of the God complex. Okay, I have many medic friends, and they've suffered that spiritually. That you think you're God now, yeah? And I'm a medic, what do you know? Yeah? That's very dangerous spiritually, yeah? And always humble yourself. Wallahi, there's nothing more attractive than a humble man. Yeah? Isn't that right, sisters? But it's true, and this is very dangerous, especially for medics, because it becomes arrogant. And what is arrogance in the Islamic tradition? Is that you think you're better than others and you reject the truth. And just because we have a label that's been socialized as something high, at the end of the day, we're all going to become one buffet, and your medicine, if you weren't sincere, is not going to take you anywhere, frankly. Sheikh Abu Isa Ni'matullah wrote a beautiful essay recently on taqwa, God consciousness, and being stupid. He said, I'd rather be stupid, and I'm just paraphrasing, I'd rather be stupid but have taqwa, God consciousness. Because no matter how much intellect you have and you don't have a consciousness or fear of God, and you don't worship Him, you're the most stupidest person anyway. Because the people of hell, what do they say? If only we used our reason. So don't delude yourself with this stuff, right? It's crap. And interestingly, this is why the Quran generally deals with the ego in order for you to learn first, so there's a fertile ground. This is why, how does the Quran deal with the ego? Many ways. One of the ways is, think about your origins. You were a despised fluid, man. And you know about these fluids, you're medics, right? You came from nutfatin min maniyin. You're a nutfa from mani, from a despised fluid, from sperm, right? From semen. That's what you were. That's what I was, man. And now you think, I'm this and I'm that, and I should be glorified? You muppet. Yeah? I'm talking to myself as well. And the other thing is, go a little bit later on. What happens to the sperm? Probably fertilization, implantation. Then you have, I don't know, what else do you have? All the stages of embryology, yeah? So, then you're born. And then you're born, you can even wipe your own backside. You know what? We act sometimes as if we were never babies. As if we were born with everything. I was born intellectual, I was born smart, I was born with these abilities. You couldn't even keep your neck up. You couldn't keep your neck up. You couldn't wipe your poo-poo. No, but think about this. Reflect on these realities. And we think, we're special. And this is why I find it so absurd. Why in this society, there is a growth of putting our parents who get old into old people's home. It's terrible. It's just a cycle of life. They're going to turn into babies again. And it's your turn to take care of it. It's a cycle of life, isn't it? Which is some of them, wallahi, there was a Muslim sister who knows my wife. And, she was like, I'm the only person who's in the old people's home. Some of these old parents, they don't see their children like once every 2 years. And they're just checking if they've died or not, if they're going to get the inheritance or not. Yeah, it's disgusting, but let's be careful we don't become like that. Let's be careful. Because there's a lot of, wallahi, there's a lot of nifaq in our community. There's a lot of hypocrisy in our community. Like, I was told I can't mention that today. I'm not going to mention it then. But anyway, we need to sort ourselves out, sort our home out. Because if we revive the sunnah, and there is khair, there's a lot of goodness in us, as per the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If we revive it, we'll be able to show a beacon of light to everybody else. Anyway, so Islam deals with arrogance from that perspective. Then it also says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةَ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul is going to taste death. And interesting, the words for death in the Quran don't mean utter annihilation, they are transitionary. It's like almost to another stage, the real stage, the real life, yeah? And interestingly, the Quran deals with your ego there. Like, you're living for 80 years, 70 years at best, you might die tomorrow, bro. Don't. I feel very guilty if that would happen, yeah? But the point is, do you see the point? We don't know. The angel of death, doesn't have an appointment, yeah? He could come anytime, anywhere, suddenly, like this. And you just wouldn't know. So it makes you reflect on that reality. I'm going to become worm buffet. That's what I'm going to do. And if we reflect on this, our egos now are a little bit broken, if we really reflect on this. And therefore, we will come to the conclusion, without the divine, we're finished. I'm telling you, we are finished. And the philosopher Nietzsche, in his Nietzschean dialectic, he made an amazing point. He prophesied. He said, Europe in the next 200 years, they're going to go through a process. We live in a secular society now. We divorced God away from our morality, many of us, from our politics and society. And in taking God away, we're going to eventually realize that everything is meaningless. We're going to eventually realize that everything is meaningless because who are you to attribute things meaning? It's a self-delusion because you're just a subjective, relative thing. You don't transcend subjectivity. So essentially we're meaningless. It doesn't have any ultimate meaning, and I would even argue value. Because if you train as a doctor to save lives and I train as a boxer to kill people or harm people, what difference does it make? We're both going to end in the grave. If you cured cancer, if you cured HIV, if you solved the problem of diabetes, if you created world peace, or if you put babies through a mincemeat machine like Saddam Hussein used to do, what difference does it make if you're just going to be one buffet? If you're going to be compost, bruv, yeah? Let's give all street. I know you guys are street guys, you come to Kings, you think you're posh. This is bakwas, mate. Yeah? So listen, let's play it real. Let's play it real. This is real stuff. So in reality, there's no meaning. In reality, it's meaningless. And Nietzsche raised that interesting point. And he said, in this crisis of humanity, we'll have to realize that we will have to make ourselves God. Because we will have to give what objective values are and what objective meaning is and ultimate meaning. But then he realized the problem with that. Because if I become a God and you become a God, then we're going to be different. And that's why he rhetorically said, I have my values, where are yours? So we don't run away from this. It's almost meaningless. And this is why Professor Krauss tried to rationalize incest. And even from this perspective, ladies and gentlemen, brothers, sisters and friends, we have to also realize that I'm not saying scientifically or rationally there must be a purpose, but it's more of a gut feeling. It's more of a psychological inference. And it makes sense because the chair you're sitting on, it's inanimate, but it's to keep your weight up. And interestingly, in a particular forest, there is a moth. And that moth drinks the sap of a particular tree. And underneath that moth, there is another moth. And the first moth, when it drinks from that tree, it instantaneously almost excretes. There's a poo-poo. Honestly, this is David Attenborough for you, yeah? There's a moth on a tree, drinks the sap, and it does a poo-poo. It's like, yeah, continuously. There is a second moth underneath. Do you know what it does? It drinks the poo. And even in biology, there's a concept of structure and function, which is almost like teleological purpose. And the function or the purpose of the second moth is to prevent the poo or the excrement from trickling down the tree so the insects and ants don't travel up and kill the first moth. So the second moth is the first moth's insurance policy. Now the reason I'm mentioning this because are you going to value the chair more than yourself? Are you going to value a moth that you've never known? And if there was moth genocide, you wouldn't care? But you give that purpose but not your own existence? Come on, man. Let's smell the Play-Doh. Not the coffee, because we're children. We're childish. Honestly. So that's why purpose makes sense. Because if not, then we're all doomed anyway. We're on a sinking ship. It's the Titanic. This universe is going to die. It's going to suffer heat death. What's the point of reshuffling the deck chairs? That's what the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, he raised these issues in his book on evil and suffering, and he even wrote an essay on suicide. Do you know that? He also justified polygamy as well, by the way. Western philosopher, atheist. Imagine that. No? Not impressed, bro? Your wife must be in the room then. So, you're not married yet? Inshallah, may Allah bless you with a healthy wife. So, psychologically and everything else, of course. So, and everybody have fruitful marriages, yeah? Why not? We should send good dua and prayers on our brothers and sisters and the wider society as well. So, this is the narrative, people. We can show good reasons that God exists. We've shown that science doesn't really deal with the problem because we know its method is de-scoped when you ask the question of does God exist. Also, we talked about induction, and we knew it was probabilistic, and we discussed why. And now, I think I gave you a deductive argument. Now, we could translate everything I said in the following way. Number one, whatever begins to exist is a cause. Number two, the universe began. Number three, therefore the universe is a cause. And we just discussed what the reality of that uncaused cause is. That's a deductive argument. If the premises are sound, and it's a valid argument, therefore the conclusion is necessarily true. To deny it, in my opinion, would be equivalent of denying reality. So, let's finally end by talking about the spirituality of it, because we can't just be intellectual robots. If you really think about it, and I've mentioned this before, a few days ago at King's, the other campus, we talked about the concept of slavery. That generally in the West we have these ideas of freedom and libertarianism and liberty, which is fair enough from a political perspective. But I want to discuss this from an existential perspective, meaning what does it mean to exist? Because you, sir, didn't choose that you were going to be a man. You didn't choose, did you? You did? Okay, you didn't. So you didn't choose that he was going to be a man. You didn't choose that you were going to be Asian, I'm assuming, right? You didn't choose that you were going to be black. Did you choose you're going to be black, bro? No, you didn't choose that. I didn't choose that I was going to be Greek, looking like a Pakistani. You know, I say it all the time, but you laugh all the time. It's one of those repeated jokes. You never chose that you're going to be female. You never chose that you're going to be white, Asian, black, blue. You never chose your parents, your siblings. Never chose your social-economic circumstances. Never chose your cot. Never chose the type of milk you were going to drink. Never chose how your mother was even going to cut your toenails. Because there's different ways. I know it's so simplistic, but you didn't choose even the most ridiculous things. You didn't choose the haircut you were going to get when you were growing up. You didn't choose your trust fund. You didn't choose your grandparents. You didn't choose your presents. You had no choice in these things. You didn't choose your pets in the beginning. You didn't choose the food that you were going to eat. If you're going to be vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, vegetarian. I said that twice. Yeah? Do you see? You had no choice in these things, and you claim to be free. You claim to have this liberty. And even worse, you didn't even choose the society that you're going to be brought up in, because social pressure affects you. It's called the social norm. Study psychology. Social constructionism. You have the influential structures in society, whether they're religious, irreligious, economic, the priests, the influentials, and they influence us in so many different ways via the media, education. And the reason they do that, because in social theory, the reason human beings look to society is because they want certainty. And when we don't have certainty, we go to society, even the way you look. That's why many women, especially in the West, and this is not a religious cliche, it's actually a fact, even in feminism. Read it. They find a sense of who they are through their beauty, through the social norm, the social media constructs. You know, L'Oreal, because I'm worth it. Yeah? The magazines making us feel really, really ugly. Yeah, like Malcolm X, Malcolm X made a beautiful point about because we believe in oneness, the oneness of God, the oneness of creation from that perspective. It emanated from the oneness of the divine. So therefore it links back to his reality. Malcolm X said that the beauty of a woman in Islam is holistic. We don't reduce it to, she's got nice eyes, or I like her feet, or I like her arms, yeah? You see that? Oh, I really love his smile, yeah? He's got a good sense of humor, yeah? All that rubbish, yeah? So, we don't reduce human beings in a reductionist way. We see them holistically. And this is why in an ideal Muslim marriage, no matter what your wife looks like, you're going to be totally in love with her. You are. Because it's that beyond the reductionist perspective that you fall in love with. Because you know that's going to change. When she's 80, bruv, she ain't going to be like that. Yeah? Whether you like it or not. Yeah? So, the point is, we see a woman or a beauty, or whether it's the beauty of a man as well, in a holistic way. His personality, the way he smiles, his nur, the light that emanates from him. Not literally, yeah? The way he acts. And that's why you find a lot of actors, right? They're not the best looking, but you just have an affinity for them. Because it's like the kind of people that walk into the room and like, he just lit the room up. And you can't reduce it because it's his holistic nature. Because if you were to take his eyes and his nose and his mouth, you'd be like, ew. Yeah? But you see his holistic nature. Okay? And this is why amongst friends, if you got a group of friends, like usually 3 or 4s, when one of the key guys is away from the group, you're playing football or something, it's not the same day. Do you have that? Have you experienced that before? That's because you live with your Xbox, that's why. Or TV or your phone. You've never experienced that before. Like someone's missing from the group. Be emotional for once, man. What's the matter with you? Be human. You've experienced that, right? Yeah, exactly. You just need that person there. And that's what Malcolm X was trying to say. That holistic nature. So, we go to society as though we're enslaved to that social norm because we don't have certainty, therefore we want to look in a certain way. I remember working for the police IT organization at the time, and the police IT organization was a non-departmental government body. It's been disbanded now. I was a program office manager, just doing stuff. And basically, there was a PA, and she used to wear really high heels. Now, I'm not making a judgment here. I'm just giving an example. And the shoes were nice. They were glossy and green, or whatever the case may be. Yeah? But you would see like 2 plasters on her heel, and they were bleeding. And me being Greek was like, what are you doing? What's the matter with you? I mean, if I were to wear those, I'd have bad back, bad feet. I mean, her feet are probably like crooked, yeah? Because you know how it D-shapes women's feet, yeah? That's a big problem in cosmetics, actually, is the women's feet. So how do I know? So the point is, and I asked the question, why do you do that? Oh, it makes me feel better about myself. I'm not going to take that as an answer. So, a bit of an existential questioning. Ask the why again. But why does it make you feel better about yourself? And then she started to think, because she's suspending that type of thinking. And she was like, because it makes me look good. But why do you think it makes you look good? Because people think it looks good. Do you think it looks good? I don't know. Are you comfortable like that? Isn't that like self-torture? She took her shoes off. But the point is, it raises a point, and many of our lives are that shallow. We don't ask the next question, and it doesn't just exist in the Western world. It's amongst the Muslim world as well. Go to Dubai, go to the Khalij, go to the Gulf. I mean, that place is a disgrace. Absolutely, no offense, Khalijis, yeah? But it's a disgrace. The reason it's a disgrace, they've got so much money, they're filthy rich. Wallahi, I've been there many times. I give salam, peace be upon you, salam alaikum, to, the all garbs, Arabisms, yeah? They want to give you salam. Who is this? This is Dagestani. But it's true, isn't it? Yeah? And the point I'm trying to make here, we're enslaved to that social norm. So if we're enslaved to our biological, economic context, familial, like the family context, and we're enslaved to social pressure, then the question I ask you is, are you really free? I'm telling you, the philosophers thought about this and they said the best act of freedom is what? Suicide. Do you know that? And that's why even David Hume wrote an essay called Suicide. Think about it, that's the best act of freedom. I didn't choose this, I didn't choose that, I didn't choose all these things that affect who I am now, but you know what? This is my choice. Bang. Morbid, huh? Not a nice thought. That's why Islam came to save you from that. Because Ibn Qayyim, the 14th century theologian, he said if you want true liberty, then there's only one way to achieve it. Because the soul, the self, is called ruh in Arabic. And we don't know much about the ruh. It's the command, it's the hukm, it's the amr, it's the command of Allah, of God. But the word ruh is etymologically linked to the word raha. Do you know what raha means? It means like serenity, liberty, sense of freedom. So the ruh is searching for that freedom. And Ibn Qayyim said, the only way to free yourself from your context you never chose, from your gender you never chose, from your social biological upbringing you never chose, from the social norm you never chose, the only way to free yourself is by changing your slavery to God. Because He transcends these ephemeral, empty shackles. That's why I would argue a religious person, from this perspective, is truly free. Because he's not enslaved and enchained to his inner desires. He's not enslaved and enchained to social norm and social pressure. This is a dangerous thought. Because what if society starts to develop a different social norm that immorality is good? That can happen, right? If social norms and social morals develop just as a result of political and social changes, this is why religious people in this society must take a stand. That doesn't mean we have to be dogmatic. It doesn't mean that. But just take a stand, have a stance. You know? So the only way to free itself is by having ubudiyya, the servanthood to the divine reality. It frees you from this. And that's why, a sister who's covering her hair is actually more free than a woman who's not covering her hair from that perspective. Now, I'm not making a judgment on who should cover their hair and who shouldn't. That's a different issue. But I'm trying to show that the symbolic act of doing something for God, whether it's covering your hair or praying or whatever the case may be, that's an act of freeing yourself from your illusory desires and what from society is expecting from you. Because in reality, God knows you better than you know yourself. Allah knows Hamza better than Hamza knows Hamza. God, by the way, when I use the word Allah, linguistically according to the Arabists, it means Al-Ilah, the deity. And if you read the Christian Aramaic Bible, you see the word Allah, the deity. It's not like, an alien concept or term or it's like another God. It's the same divine reality, okay? So, make your choice. What we're going to do, it's like taking the red pill, the blue pill in the Matrix. Honestly, true. You wake up to reality and you find out I'm going to be enslaved to all these things or free myself from these things. Removing the shackles from the ephemeral to the divine. Your choice. God bless you. Q&A. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Thank you very much, Brother Hamza Tzortzis, for that. There's a lot to think about on that talk. He talked us through the existence of God and many deep questions that perhaps would take the salvation of what we believe so far throughout our lives. He's covered issues about morality, about spirituality, so loads to think about. One thing I'd like to advise everyone, don't become depressed with how little choice that you've had in your life. There is a way out. And I'm not talking about suicide. So, inshallah, I'd like you all to think about what's been said, and I think the best way to do that is to ask questions, to sort of, to sort of fight it out if there's a need, intellectually speaking, and ask any questions that you have, any sort of anything that's sort of nagging at the back of your mind. And to do that will allow everyone to, you can raise your hand and ask a question, or you may write it down and we can read it to the speaker, and we'll take it from there. So have we got any questions from the ground?
Regarding the nature of God, why can't the arguments that you applied to God being the creator apply to the universe and vice versa? So why could God not have a creator? Why must God be uncreated, eternal, one? Why cannot the universe be that, and why must God be that?
Okay. The point is very simple, is that if something begins, it requires a cause. This is metaphysically, ontologically, philosophically, logically necessary. The easiest answer to that is, well, God never began to exist. Because we posited a necessary, uncreated creator, because you can't have an infinite regress of causes. And you may ask, why can't you say that about the universe? Well, we've proven that it began, so you can't even apply that question. That's the answer.
Well, can't you say then God must have began because God is?
Well, by definition, there's two ways of looking at this. From a definitive perspective, what's the definition of God? It's the uncreated creator. So it's like saying, how did the uncreated creator began? But by definition, he's uncreated, so he never began, so he doesn't apply. The other point is, well, we've posited a necessary uncaused cause. We'll always need one. If there is one, then it's going to have certain attributes which are in line with the divine humanity. That's the way to argue it. I mean, the easiest thing to say is, look, what Professor Varghese, philosopher Abraham Varghese said, no one's denying something must be pre-eternal. It's either the universe itself or what caused the universe. Pick your choice. We can't say it's the universe because we've justified it began. Do you see? That's the easiest answer.
Would you like to add another question to that, or are you happy with that answer? Yeah?
You don't look happy, answer. Now you do, mashallah.
If you want to write your questions down, you can write it down on a piece of paper and someone can pass it down to the front. We'll take a question from the back since we've taken one. Yeah.
You know, you were saying how the mind has to sort of win over the heart if you don't believe in a God. Well, my problem is that I can rationalise the existence of God, but my heart can't feel the presence of God. So how do I go about tackling that?
You think give me a few seconds. I think the best way to think about that, or to try and establish that, so you can rationalize God intellectually, but there's a problem with the heart. You know what? Abraham, alayhi salam, he asked for a pure heart before he asked for knowledge. I think you've done it the other way. So you just do it the other way. And how do you achieve a pure heart in the Islamic tradition? Well, God says, for example, He doesn't guide the unjust, the ungrateful, the egotistical, the arrogant, the criminals. So there's almost like a correlation via the divine wisdom, who God guides and who doesn't, via their free choice. So, I would argue this engage in spiritual activity. And you know, when you don't feel it, just keep on doing it. This is called prior perceptual psychology. For example, I actually got temperature as we speak, yeah? But I'm changing my state. So if I'm really sad, just smile, even if it's a fake smile. And if you feel down, so come on! Yeah! This is prior, now look, I feel great. So I can take over the world, yeah? So the point is, it's prior perceptual psychology, that your behavior can change your state. And this is Islamic spiritual psychology. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he was a Sahaba, a companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the 10 promised paradise. And he basically said, if you don't cry in the last third of the night, pretend to cry. Continue crying from humility and consciousness of Allah, and then it will become part of you. And that's the struggle. Because don't forget, don't worship God for the feeling of worship. Worship God because He deserves to be worshipped. The byproduct is the feeling. Don't fall for the new age spiritual narrative thinking, just because I pray 5 times a day, I'm flying on the carpet. I feel so great about myself. And Ibn Qayyim said you end up worshipping the feeling and not worshipping Allah. And that's the subtlety of the ego, isn't it? Don't get me wrong, we want to chase that feeling because we want to worship Allah, which is fine. So, pray 5 times a day. Do dhikr, according to the prophetic traditions in the Quran. Dhikr meaning the remembrance of God. Do it slowly, nicely, with consciousness. Like to develop a state of ihsan. Ihsan is like you worship Allah as if you see Him, and although you don't see Him, He sees you. And that's telling you that you have almost a consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and have that. So when you do dhikr, you know some people when they finish, you know what dhikr is, sister, yeah? So you know when you do dhikr, you know when you say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, yeah? 33 times after prayer. Some people are like this. That's it, they do it so fast. Now, An-Nawawi, he said, in order to do a dhikr and for it to be meaningful, say it, give the words the justice and understand the meaning. So, Subhanallah, which means glorified is Allah, transcendent is He. Alhamdulillah. It's a state. The words should represent a state. So don't just do the words and try and make them represent your state, which is, I am thankful, I am thankful. If you do these things, then you have a spiritual program, pray, do the dhikr, fast if you can, Mondays and Thursdays, read Quran, even if you don't understand it. One of the beauties of the Quran is when you read it, it changes you, you don't even know why. Trust me, it just does. By the way, I'm not claiming to be the spiritual warrior, yeah? I'm nothing what I'm saying. This advice is for myself as well. So, but when I have engaged with the Quran in that way, it does something to you that you won't swear and procrastinate anymore, for example. You're like, well, how did that happen? It's a healing and a mercy for the believers. Read the Quran, recite it with tartil, with the best way as possible. And if you can't read Quran properly, don't worry. Every time you hesitate, you get barakah and reward from it anyway. So engage in a program, and it'll work. For example, maybe you might have hatred you didn't know, or ego. Apologize to people you never apologized to before, they deserve your apology. If you hate someone, make dua for them. You know, if I hate so-and-so, you don't want that feeling anymore, make sincere supplication for them, like, oh Allah, you know, help so-and-so. And the Sahaba used to do this to purify their heart at night. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, this guy's going to paradise. And the Sahaba wanted to follow him, say, he does nothing special. And they asked him, what do you do? He says, well, I make sure when I sleep at night, I don't have any hatred for anybody. You see? Ask for forgiveness, reduce your ego, and it's an uplifting process. And you end up not caring what people think at all, you just care what Allah thinks. And therefore you feel like a fool. And be happy with it, you be happy with yourself. Because who's a fool? A fool by people's standards or Allah's standards? Yeah, only a fool will not follow the method of Ibrahim. So engage in that. You have to struggle with it. And it's not easy. Don't think you press a button, you got angels flying, fireworks, and you feel great, and you're no way. It's gonna be one of those things that it's gonna be actually your heart's always gonna waver. And there's a dua is that oh Allah, you're the control of the hearts, and make my heart firm on your religion. Make dua as well for it. Realize that you are not the means for your guidance. Because some people think, when I do this dhikr, when I do this prayers, when I do this Quran, therefore I'm going to be this person. No. That's just a means that Allah has enabled for you to achieve that. Allah is the efficient means. Sometimes we think, why is my life like this? I pray, I do this. But you think Allah, you think praying and worship is like putting money in a bank? Islam, we don't believe this. And some Christians unfortunately think that Islam is like that because we show Islam is like that. Deeds, cash a check at the end of Day of Judgment. Yeah? You know what? There's a hadith that says, if you did all the deeds in the world and you think that you're going to be saved just by your deeds, Allah will put on the other scale your eyesight. Then you go straight to hell. Because no amount of deeds is going to save you. It's because of the love and mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. Realize that as well. I mean, there's so many things to talk about. When you do wudu, remember that prayer starts with wudu. Some people do wudu so fast. They could do it. I've seen a guy do it with like a finger of water. I saw some guy, you know the fountain, water fountain you drink? So some guy do wudu there in the office. He just dripped it, and that's it. Which is fine, you could do that. It fulfills the criteria. But, ibadah starts from the wudu. Have the right thoughts. There's so many things. Don't ask me. Ask someone who knows. There are many brothers who are spiritually inclined, who have scholarly connection. I don't have a scholarly connection like that. Ask the ulama and the imams that you trust. But this is just a suggestion. Don't think, Hamza said it, therefore it's true. That would be utter bakwas.
We'll take a question from the front.
So you mentioned Occam's razor, which in your debate with Professor Krauss, he said that the simpler answer would be 0.
Were you there?
Yeah. Which I didn't really catch the answer to that.
Yeah, the way...
From a deductive point of view, I understand that you've defeated all other arguments, so there's an existing God.
Yes.
But if you look at the theory itself, for those of us who don't know the theory,
yes,
could you explain why it's not 0 and why 1?
Well, the reason it's not zero because does zero have explanatory scope?
How do you know?
Does zero answer a question? If I said to you, it's a must that something must begin, must have a cause if it begins, and the answer is zero. Now that is very simple. Doesn't answer anything.
Well, that would depend on your question.
Well, the
If
question
your
is,
question is 0 plus 0 plus 0 equals 0, then 0 would answer that.
that's not the question though. The question is, if the universe began,
Yeah.
could
come
it
from
be,
nothing.
could it come from a zero? Could the answer be a zero creator or zero cause? Which means no cause. So that itself doesn't answer anything because metaphysically, you know, whatever begins to exist requires a cause, and you're saying zero, which is no cause, which means you're not answering the question. That's why I said to him, you have misunderstood Occam's razor. It's not only the simplest explanation, it's the most comprehensive too. It is very simple, zero, but there's absolutely no explanatory scope or power because zero gives zero. Do you see the point? So he misunderstood Occam's razor.
We'll take another question.
There's a lady up there.
Yep. Yep. Would you like- Yep, you can answer your question.
Near the end, they talk on how the religious person is truly free because they are separate from society. But I would argue that they are not truly free if the definition of society that you give is one, for example, in the words of the dictionary, they'll say a group of people with the same beliefs, the people that have the same mindset and operate life the same way. So according to that definition, Islam is a society. And so you're not becoming free from society, but you're merely becoming a slave to a different society. So can you please explain your...
Yeah, well, the reason that society will be free is because their social norm is as a result of enslaving themselves to God. That's the difference. Whereas the social norm in other societies is more based on other constructs like materialism or capitalism, which are all material constructs. Whereas if a society is referring to the divine, it transcends all of that. So yeah, you're right. If a society does that, then that society is free by definition. Because if each individual is worshipping God and not themselves and not a construct, then they're free by my definition. So a free person plus another free person plus another free person means they're all free. You see?
Without referring to self, what is the definition of free?
Well, free from this perspective is that you're not shackled to the material ephemeral world. That's what I mean. Because in essence, it's all slavery anyway. You're just changing your slavery. But it's more rational and profound because he knows you better than you know yourself. He transcends your subjectivity, your limitations and your weaknesses. By definition. So that's why the biggest question is, well, does he exist in the first place? And did he announce himself to mankind? Is there a revelation? If those are true, then it follows that you have to accept it. I would argue.
Okay, we will allow for another 15 minutes for questions. So just so you all know, after which we've got another part of the program which we'll discuss later on, which you all perhaps know about already. So we'll take another 15 minutes of questions from the floor. So, can I see if there's anyone else? Yeah? Okay, would you like to ask your question?
I thought your arguments were very good, but what I didn't understand is why Islam and not another religion. Because surely your arguments apply to another religion which follows one God.
Yes. The reason I would argue Islam from this argument is because what we've discussed rationally, that this is the divine reality, it's in line with Islamic theology. Like other theologies, for example, Hinduism would believe in pantheism, that God is within the creative reality. Some aspects of Christianity, and I'm not claiming to know Christianity, so it might be a straw man, it could be corrected, that, you know, God, when he came in the form of his Son, which is part of the Trinity, which means he's part of the triune God. But I do understand that Muslims don't understand the Trinity well anyway. We misrepresent it because Jesus had a divine nature and a human nature as well. So, but that we'll find hard to understand because how can the divine nature manifests itself physically from that perspective. But that we could debate until cows come home. The main argument is we have to go to the next step, which is revelation. How did God announce himself to mankind? And the Quran, the book of humanity that Muslims believe to be from the divine, the Quran appreciates the Torah, which is the Torah, and the Injil, which is the Bible, and all the other scriptures. And it says they were true, but there was a process of human modification, which you can see in the textual integrity of the biblical discourse. And all the Quran is asserting is this is the Furqan meaning the differentiator. It's like the final installment. You know, that was Windows 98, it worked. This is Windows 7, yeah? It's the upgrade. In a humble way. That's why Muslims should never claim they have a monopoly on the truth. They should just claim that we have an unbroken chain of knowledge to the divine. We can trace it. So the Quran, we argue, is preserved. We argue that it's a divine book because it's a linguistic miracle, it's a historical miracle, has things within it that can't be explained naturalistically. And there's a whole narrative. So I would sincerely ask you just to investigate the Quran.
I think we've got a series of lectures lined up for the rest of the week, which discusses a lot of the stuff that Hamza's been going through. So you can find out more throughout the week if you wish. Any more questions from the front? Okay, go.
Yeah, over. As in, what I didn't understand, as in I was with you on the preceding bit, that there had to be something preceding this universe, but I didn't understand the criteria that you set out for it. As in, I didn't understand what has to be powerful, I don't understand what has to be eternal, because for something like a dominator to go, it's a tiny flick, and it just carries on going. I don't know why, because it seemed to me as though that criteria, you just filled it, and it didn't come to you, and then it fulfilled Islamic ones.
No, not really, because they're inferences, which are reasoning to the best conclusion. For example, if there's an uncreated creator and he created the universe, I mean, are we going to say that it's not powerful? I mean, that means, let's take the opposite of that. Show me how that uncreated creator is not powerful.
It's a bit like fair enough, I can't, but in the same method you can't prove otherwise.
No,
That's
you
called belief.
No, you can, because the reason you can prove it is because, for example, think about the potential energy lodged in a single atom. It's phenomenal. You create a nuclear bomb. Okay? Now we're saying the universe once wasn't there, and then there's a whole load of things like atoms and energy. So it's not as if you're just starting a process. We're saying this is, could it just be via nothing? If not, then it has to be via a certain energy or power. If you can't see that inference, I just don't. Oh, sorry. If you don't see that inference, and I find it hard to explain. Okay, like even the touch of the dominoes is a power. Like your finger.
It's power, but I wouldn't call it powerful. I wouldn't call it above the power of a single.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, right. I see. Yeah, I agree. But we're making an inference, which is reasoning to the best conclusions. And in reality, if there is nothing, by what we mean nothing, the absence of anything, something, and all of a sudden you have something like an atom appearing, the whole universe is made up of atoms, and that atom itself has a lodged energy, a potential energy of something so immense, it's only reasonable to claim that it must be powerful. Otherwise, how did that potential energy appear in the first place?
But then the most logical would be that God has the power of a single atom, wouldn't it?
Yes, or all the atoms in the universe. Which, if you don't think that's all powerful, then we've got issues, man. Would you agree? It's not just one atom, by the way, it's a whole range of atoms.
As in, like, it's above my comprehension. I don't know.
Well, it's an inference. An inference is your reasoning to the best conclusion. So we're saying we've got no argument to argue that he's not powerful, or we have an argument to argue that he's slightly powerful. So you take that and you could infer, therefore, that he's powerful like a divine. And there's nothing wrong with that, because there's no other best explanation. So in a way, you're asking me, I need an explanation for the best explanation, but that's irrational, because if you want an explanation for the best explanation that requires an explanation that requires an explanation, you would never have an explanation in the first place.
But don't you think we should try for an explanation?
Well, that is an explanation. That's the
No, but
point.
you're saying there's no point delving for an actual explanation if we have a almost fit explanation. If we have a almost...
No, but you know your criteria. If you apply that to science, there'll be no science. Because most of the explanation in science is an almost fit explanation because of the inductive method. It's like self-defeating. You wouldn't have a mobile phone. You wouldn't have the foundations of this room, because even physics is based on induction, especially classical physics, and therefore we should not trust it by your definition.
Fair enough.
We can discuss this over a pint of milk.
Have we got any other questions? Everyone's pointing towards different people. Okay, we'll take someone from the front now. Yeah?
One talks about fitrah. Is there any way that can be proven that it exists? Because Allah says, "Fitrat Allahi fatara an-nas alayha." So, is there any way it can be proven apart from?
Well, proof is a big word, but
Or alluded to it?
yes, I mean, fitra in the Arabic language comes from the root fa, which you have words like fatrun and fatarahu, which means something was created within us to appreciate the oneness and worship God. Now, do we have evidence for this? Well, we have some social and anthropological evidence. We have works from Professor Bruce Hood, from Oliviera Petrovich, and Professor Bartlett, I believe, from Oxford. They are anthropologists and sociologists, and they discuss that if you take atheist children even, and you put them on a desert island, they're going to start believing in the divine. Look at atheist cultures like China or Russia. They had that sanctification instinct, that worship instinct manifesting itself. You had big statues of Stalin and Lenin. So that's an indication of the fitrah.
We'll take one more question from the back.
And even celebrity culture is the indication of the fitrah. What's that name? Justin Bieber, yeah? Why is that funny? Justin Bieber, yeah? He followed some of his fans on Twitter and they almost fainted. I've been trying for 5 years to people follow me. If that's not worship, then what is? Yeah? That's the fitrah. That's why Muslim fathers and any father, regardless of religion, and mothers, they should teach their children not to have that slave-like mentality. It's very disempowering, it's irrational, and it just reduces the human being to, those fish that clean the teeth of a whale. You're that scummy fish that cleans the teeth of a whale. That's what that kind of worship is. You see that in the program. You have a big whale, and you got that scum on the teeth, and you got those fish cleaning the teeth. So that's what that type of worship is. It's disgraceful. If my daughter did that, I don't know what I would do. I mean, I would hang myself because it would be my fault, isn't it? I mean, what would you do? I mean, you give them advice, obviously, and you teach them, but hopefully we create human beings that are empowered via the divine, not via things that don't have any power.
Last question from the back.
I just wanted to ask if you should kind of describe some of the attributes of God, because as in like how much does Allah love us and why should we love God, that kind of thing. It's kind of related to the other questions.
Why don't you tell the audience? Because you obviously know the answer.
No, I don't know.
I bet you do.
It's kind of hard for me to kind of connect.
Okay, well basically, take one name and attribute of Allah Azza wa Jal. One of his names is Al-Hudud, which means in the Arabic language, it's a definite particle, alif lam, the loving. And this form of love is an excessive form of love. And it's been elucidated by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said in the prophetic tradition that God loves you more than a mother loves a child. Now this is not anthropomorphic, because is there any greater love than the love of a mother? No. So it's trying to indicate he loves you more than this, meaning it transcends any your understanding of love. So this is Allah. Allah loves you from that perspective. There's Ar-Rahman, Rahm, compassionate, or the giver of mercy. This is one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names and attributes. We also have, for example, Al-Khaliq, He's the creator. He originated things when they were preceded by their non-existence. Kun fayakun, it be and it is. We have, for instance, Allah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him as al-latif, the subtle. And he's subtle with the believers. Like, you know, sometimes you get subtle, you call them signs almost, to know how to direct your life and your reality, you know? And you need to have a finely tuned spiritual awareness to understand that. Obviously, you're not going to take signs that are against the Sharia, Islamic law. But for example, when we pray istikhara, when it's the prayer of asking for guidance, sometimes you feel it. Now, generally the scholars say you're not going to find a dream, but some people see dreams. I mean, wallahu alam. But, you know, there's almost like you have more of a conviction in that decision. And when you're less in that conviction, you know that's a sign, right, Allah is telling me this is not for me. You see? So yeah, I mean, there's a very good book called The Beautiful Names of Allah. People should study that, and then that's how you get to know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Ibn Qayyim, he said you could even know Allah just by looking at creation. Because creation is beauty, and by the way, Allah is the beautiful. That's one of his names and attributes. For example, He is the beautiful. That's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah is beauty and He loves beauty. So, yeah, I mean, these are some aspects of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you know what? You know some of these things, there's no point just telling you academically or by words. You have to experience them, you have to feel them. You know? And you really see that. You know, how are you going to know that Allah is the one who heals? If you don't become sick. And when you're cured, you know, Allah healed me. He wasn't the doctor, because they're just like the intermediary cause. Allah is the efficient cause. So, yeah, I bet you could have done better than me.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it here. We'll take one more question. So much pressure. Okay, so we'll take one more question and then we'll end it there.
Firstly, thank you, and pardon my arrogance if I don't know. I wanted to ask, is there a way for us to have good morals and to know what to do with a gut feeling, as you said previously, rather than being taught from a divine object like God and Allah? Or can't we, and we do need to be told? And if so, why can't we do it with a gut feeling?
Well, many things you can't. Even the Quran appreciates like two types of good. It's like the innate human good. That's why God talks to the Quraysh, the Arabs, about justice, compassion, mercy. These things have a meaning. Allah hasn't defined them. He said, why aren't you merciful? Why aren't you feeding the orphan? These are intrinsically good. So we believe there are intrinsically good things, but it doesn't mean you're holistically good. Because good in Islam means that not only do you have the human good, you have the religious good as well. So when it comes to ibadah, worship, you're not going to do that just for just to make yourself feel better. Or you're not going to do it for other people, for fame. For it to have barakah, for it to be truly good, you have to do it for God, for the sake of Allah alone. And also I would argue, who defines good? Who draws the line and where? The human subjective relative person, or the divine reality that transcends that? Take for example the question of incest. Scientifically, incest, how is it wrong? If you use contraception as what Professor Krauss talked about, is it scientifically wrong? Well, no, it doesn't harm anybody. They're using contraception, so what's the problem? Who draws the line, bro? You want to draw the line? You see my point? What abortion? When does it start? 6 weeks? 12 weeks? When does life start? Who knows? It's like Russian roulette. We could be killing millions of children, we don't even know. How do you prioritize your moral truths? We might know what morals are, but how do you prioritize them now? You're going to prioritize them? Who are you? Do you see? Who are you? Who's the government? Who's so-and-so? They're just human. Do you see the point? So that question itself raises a whole lot of questions. This is why people of religion, they go back to the divine reality. But also we have to understand as well that it all ends up in a state of heart, because some people could interpret verses in a barbaric, butcher way, can't they? Other people could do it in a way that's valid and relevant. And that is to do with your state of heart as well. So it's a combination of everything. But you can't take divine out of the picture. What is good? How do you know? Who prioritizes that goodness? Important questions. That's why we have issues. We always debate. I mean, go to Radio 4, listen to the Moral Maze. Alexander McGrath, the professor from Oxford, the Christian, who was having a discussion on that program the other day. I like Alexander McGrath.
He's a professor here at King's, eh?
Oh, is he? Hey, there you go. By the way, that's your respected dean, if you didn't know. So be on your best behavior. So, I would like to thank him for facilitating this as well, for allowing this to happen as well. So Alexander McGrath, for example, he was talking about, for example, I think it was the divine command theory, that God's commands come from via His will Himself, and He is definitive of good. He defines what good is, and why? Because He's the being worthy of worship, and the being worthy of worship is the highest moral being. But these debates will continue to the Day of Judgment, so I hope that raises questions for you to investigate further.
Thank you.
God bless, guys. Thank you very much.
That would have to be our last question, unfortunately. However, you should be able to, you have more opportunities to learn more about Islam through the week. This is only the first lecture of the DIW here at Guy's campus. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what's going to be happening for the next couple of days. So tomorrow we're going to have a lecture on the Quran being the miracle of miracles. So we alluded to the fact, or to the idea, that the Quran has many scientific points and many other things that Muslims consider to be miraculous, especially with the belief, alongside the belief that it's from God. We expect that it should be miraculous in its nature. So we'll be analysing this concept tomorrow, Tuesday. On Wednesday, we've got the KCL National Conference for Islam and Medicine. Now, this is something very new that's being done here at this university, and it's a type of conference that hasn't been done before. So we're going to be looking into the history of Islam and identifying the ways in which Muslim physicians have contributed to medical sciences as we know it today. And that's going to be presented to us by many academics who are leaders in their fields, some of whom are coming all the way from the States just to come and see you guys. So make sure you're there. Many of the students here at King's will be presenting abstracts and scientific posters based on their research into Islam's contribution to medicine as well. So you can come along and support your peers at that front. On Thursday, we have a talk. I can't read my handwriting. Okay. On Friday.
Wait, Shafil, seal of the prophets.
Yes, that's the one. So on Thursday we're going to have a talk on the Prophet Muhammad and why he is the last of all the prophets. We know of many prophets from the Bible, the Torah, and in the Quran. And so we'll be analysing the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, looking at ways in which we can learn from his life and how his life can be a beacon of light for the problems that we find ourselves today. And on Friday we're going to conclude with a talk on why Islam is the solution for mankind. Why Islam offers in its system, in its laws, many of the answers to many of the problems that we find ourselves in today's modern society. So we've got a large variety of topics that I'm sure would interest a lot of you here. If you can also try to spread the word to your friends, get them down. And throughout the week we also have loads of exhibitions taking place. Tomorrow there's going to be a maze at the quad. So I'll let you guys come and find out what that is. So this week is going to be a really packed out week, and I really encourage all of you, whether you're Muslim, whether you're not a Muslim, whether you're a person of faith or non-faith, come along, find out. There's no harm in just finding out, because these questions question the actual core of your existence. Some of these questions are relevant to you as a human being, looking into how you should be living the rest of your life. So these are questions that deserve some level of attention. I've got a few more points to make. First of all, I'd like to thank the Dean, Professor Burridge, for coming down. I know he's a very busy man, but we're very pleased and we're very happy that he spent the evening with us today. And I'd also like to thank Brother Hamza for coming down and sharing his thoughts with us. I'm sure many of you are going to walk away today and research more. Now I'm going to stop talking because it's 8:15 and usually most people walk out. by the time it hits 7:45. But today we've got some free food, hence it's a packed out lecture theatre. I'm not judging anyone, I can only speak for myself. So what we're going to be doing now, we're going to conclude the day with some traditional spicy biryani, and which you can get from the brothers and the sisters on the way out. And I'm sure many of the brothers and sisters will be heading to the prayer room, so we can continue our discussions over there. And Brother Hamza, if he can kindly join us, and if Professor Barish would like to join us, we'd be more than happy to host you. So thank you very much.